Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of Leverage TV's Ask Me Anything. And today we have the very prestigious King's College London coming on Leverage TV. We have Palak Bell joining us from King's College. So, to all you viewers out there who want to be in London, study, get your higher education in London, and at the prestigious King's College London, I think this is the right slot for you to come in, tune in, and ask any questions that you may have. Palak joins us from King's to answer any questions that you might have regarding admissions, regarding accommodation, stay, financing, anything that is currently concerning you and stopping you from studying at the King's College London right now. Palak would love to probably introduce yourself, and then maybe we can start taking questions from our viewers.
Thanks, Vijay, for that power-packed kind of start. You definitely sound like a pro coffee chat host now with that. So, yeah, my name is Palak. I work as an international student recruitment officer with Kings. I've been in the industry for about 8 years now, and I interact with students, parents, counselors as a part of my role, help them gauge more information about things starting in UK, etc. And yeah, just keeping it very short. I'm very happy to answer all the questions that you have, and I hope this turns out to be useful.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Palak, for that introduction. A little bit about myself, viewers. I'm Digvijay Gagneja, Chief Operating Officer at Leverage Edu. We help students get to their dream universities, and Palak will be here today to answer any questions that you may have about specifically getting into King's College London. So, Palak, let's get started. We have already a huge list of questions that students have asked us of us prior to this session. So we will take those first. And of course, all the viewers out there, you have any specific questions, we will keep jumping on and taking those questions as well, right? So I think just to get this evening started, the first question is around the whole application process itself, right? So everyone has heard of King's College London. They want to know, how do you apply there? What is the application process of studying at King's College London for UG, PG? I would love to understand that from you.
I assume there will be a big list, which is why I fueled myself with coffee before we started. So please don't feel guilty and shoot your questions. So with applications, like most of you would already know, UK takes undergrad applications through UCAS, and so does King's for that matter. So all our undergrad applications come through UCAS, which is of course a procedure of five choices, one person statement, you can make an account in UCAS and apply through UCAS. So that's how it happens for our undergraduate courses. For a postgraduate courses, we take direct applications through the King's through the King's website. You can go and apply to the website. The post pages also have an apply now button. So pretty much if I can say it broadly, for both the categories, for undergraduate, it's UCAS, for postgraduate, it's through the website directly. Also, if you're applying through undergrad, once you apply, I'll just quickly brief you about the post application bit there. So all your communication with the team will be through the King's Apply portal. So you anyways make an account if you're applying directly through postgrad, but if you're applying with undergrad, that is UCAS, you will be emailed the King's Apply details to you, which will be used for all further communication with the university.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Palak. And to our viewers, if you still have trouble applying, we're always there. You can reach out to us on 1-800-572-000, or you can just write into us, and we can further help you as well. Palak, going on to the second part, right, wherein King's is a very, very prestigious university, and I think the question that we hear most often is, what are the most popular courses at King's College, and what is really the acceptance rate, right? And maybe we can touch about a little bit upon eligibility as well, so that for the viewers out there to understand whether I can even qualify for applying to King's, and what is the kind of acceptance rate they can look at.
Yeah, I know. In the specific eligibility part, we heard student sentiments a lot, and we do hear a lot of rejections, and that's the case. So, with popular courses, I would say King's has about 300 courses on offer. And the last I checked, the stats was that we'd received, and this I checked, I think, a month ago, we'd received 66,000 applications for those courses so far. And out of that, about 50%, 50%, were only for the top 15 courses. And our top 3 courses from that category was law and biomedical sciences and management. But of course, being said that, it's more of a global perspective. But I think from India specifically, we see a lot of interest in AI, data science, international relations, business management, law, psychology, engineering, and medicine is a little. So medicine is very popular, but medicine only has about 30 seats worldwide for international students. So that's the case there. So yeah, management, law, all of these courses are really popular. I think the most popular will be IR, international relations, really popular. So yeah, that's about popular courses. But when I say popular courses, the caveat that comes with popular courses that it's extremely competitive to get into those as well, because they really fetch a huge amount of applications. Also with acceptance rate, I don't think King publishes that data officially, but it also depends on courses. Like I said, some courses will have high, some will have low, but I think it will be between 10 to 25%. But we don't really specifically publish that data as such.
All right. All right. It seems like it's quite competitive. What would you say be a minimum eligibility criteria for anyone to apply to courses at King's College London?
Right. So for undergrad, we have it in different categories. So, for CBSE, you will need 80 to 90%, but most of our courses is 90%. For IB, you will need to have 35 points overall and different 7666. Those kind of combinations are there. But like I said, these are all course specific. For A levels, also, we will have certain combinations. So that's how it happens for undergrad. But having said that, I repeat this right after I say this statement every time, is that just getting minimum eligibility does not guarantee you offer. So that's just a prerequisite, and our applications are judged holistically. So, a lot of students ask as a follow-up question to me that what is more important, is one thing more important than the other? Honestly, not. Meeting entry requirements is a prerequisite, will not guarantee an offer. But personal statement, letter of recommendation, all of these things are really important. Now, coming to a postgraduate eligibility. So, King's categorizes, universities offering degrees in India into three broad categories, which is highly prestigious, and recognized. Now, this is of course the list that only we possess internally as officers. It's not really available in any public domain. But if you want to check any particular university or where your university basically falls under, you can always drop us an email and we will let you know. But very broadly, so something like a Delhi University, Mumbai University will be in the highly prestigious category. Prestigious will be a little more local, but part, what do I say? Like local but high quality kind of an universities, which is more like IB University. And recognized will be more like Amity, I would say. So this is the broad list that we have. But and based on this, you will be, you'll get to know what kind of minimum scores that you need. So, for example, if you're from a highly prestigious category, so this is a little tricky. So all the postgraduate courses will list down qualifications in UK equivalent, so which is a high to one or a 2:1. Now you'll have to convert it into Indian equivalence. This whole table is given on the website. All you need to know is that what category your university falls under, and once you know that, all of that is clearly available. So, for example, if you're doing from DU and your course needs a high to 1, you will need a 65%. If your course needs a 2:1, you will need a 60%. So, and exactly like this, it happens with prestigious and recognized. So that's a whole table which you will need to refer. But I always tell students, we are absolutely not. What do I use the word? The correct word is, we're not very soft with these. So please check before you're sending an application. Don't waste your application fee, because if you're not meeting those requirements, then you will not get through. So,
Got it. Got it. Very clear, Palak. I think that's very helpful. Now that the September 21 intake is almost here, I think many students still want to know whether they can still apply for the September 21 intake. And ideally, when should they start their application process, even if it's for any later intake?
So, how the deadlines go is that for undergraduate, like I said, all our applications is through UCAS. So usually the UCAS deadline was 15th of January, but I think now they they've changed it to the 26th of January. So from next year onwards, that will be the case. So for all undergraduate courses, please feel free to stick to that because we consider those very seriously. And for postgraduate applications, it's usually March end. It was 26th of March this year. PG application is a little soft deadline, I would say, which means that we still accept applications based on whatever courses are available. So I think, but now most of the courses are now closed. I mean, we've closed a couple last week also, but that all depends on what kind of a cohort of applications we got and how satisfied were admission tutors with that. Do we still have places to collect applications? But I think now it's a late time, and usually universities try to wind this up before time because if you're going for an abroad university, you have to get your CAS, the visa, everything needs to fall in place. So that's there. But mostly it's now closed. So that's about that. And I think a good time now. There are two bits there. One, a lot of follow up questions are on this. That if we apply beforehand, is there any plus point that we have or any brownie points that we get? Honestly, no. So all applications before the deadline have equal consideration. But if you apply after the deadline, we will only consider it if places are available. However, a plus point to apply beforehand is that you might get to hear your decision sooner. So our average application processing time is 6 to 8 weeks. That's the minimum, honestly. But if you apply sooner, you might get to hear within 6 to 8 weeks, but certain time of the year is far busier than the other. So it might take longer also. But at some cases, the admission tutor will keep your application on hold and wait for everybody to apply in and probably release it later because they want to compare it with other applications. But if your application is strong, you've applied on time, then you might hear the results sooner. But I think a good time to submit your application will be definitely before December. So that, I mean, and for undergraduation, will be close to say November is a good time. So because UCAS deadline is in January and our PG deadline is in March. So I think November and December respectively will be a good time.
All right. All right. So really early then for the September 22 intake, students should start and
Yes.
try and apply in November, December this year itself.
And that also, if your pre-application homework is done. So no, I call this as pre-application homework, which is very important. I think when I deliver a session, I use the word research not less than 50 times. So and it's truly reflection. It's a true reflection. If you've panicked and written your personal statement, etc., admission tutors read tons of personal statements each day. They will in a jiffy find out if you've researched and it's a well thought out statement, or you just used a template and just filled in whatever you wanted to. So please don't wait till the end. I mean, so King's alone has about 300 courses on offer, and if you have to choose 5 courses on UCAS, right, and across different universities, and it is a tough choice. And then what students tend to do is basically not research about courses, do not read the course module, etc. So all of those bits is it's not well thought through. So yeah.
Got it. So yeah, research is the key word that maybe you'll use 50 times here as well. Super important to define which course you're really interested in and then go after it. And typically, what is the application fee for King's College? And can students apply for a waiver?
The second question I'll answer first because that's a shorter answer. Absolutely no. There is no waiver that's available at King's at all. In terms of fees, for undergraduation, like I said, the UCAS fees is applicable. So I think it was £20 for one course earlier and 25 otherwise, but now it's £22 if you're applying for a single choice and 26.5 if you're applying for more than one choices. So that's the fee bit there. With post graduation, you apply directly on our website. So that ranges between £70 to £100.
Got it. And I know you've covered this part of the next question already partially. Like, is it possible to apply for more than one course at King's? And I get that students must research a lot, especially with UCAS giving you only 5 options. But how about postgraduate students? Can they apply for more than one course at King's?
Yeah, so even with UCAS, you can apply for more than one course, but that will be counted as 2 different options. So out of 5, you'll exhaust, if you're applying for 2, you've already exhausted those 2 choices. With postgraduate applications, yes, but all of them will have a separate application, which also means a separate application fee. So you can apply to more than one option with separate applications, with separate personal statements, and also, of course, separate application fees. So that's possible.
Perfect. I think we have one of our viewers who's asked a question pertaining to admissions and eligibility, so I thought might be relevant to ask here itself. I think this is Akanksha Gupta's question, and she's asking if the graduation is done from correspondence and not a regular college, would she still be eligible to apply for a postgraduate? And is there a minimum 16-year study criteria?
So it again depends on certain degrees that are recognized and certain that are not. So for these specific cases, it's always best to check with the admissions team. So if you send us an email, we will check that out, because honestly, the team is in UK, right? And for India also, we've tried to make it as standardized as possible by categorizing universities, because all of these are so varied in evaluation and assessment of marks that it becomes really difficult for the UK team to assess it. And at the same time, a university like King's, which has so many international students, so we have students from 185 different countries. Now, to be fair to everybody and assess them at an equal level, it's very difficult for us to consider. So it's all case by case basis for these points, but you can always message us and we will check for the admissions and get back to you.
Perfect, Palak. All right. I think switching gears, and trying to understand another question that is a very frequently asked question by our students around IELTS, and if there are any waivers available for students on IELTS. So yeah, would love to understand what's KCL's take on it.
I think the simpler take, if I put it very simply with waivers and King's, is no. So every time you ask me a waiver question, I will say a no. So it's that simple as an answer. But yeah, and I understand IELTS is, English language test course is a little tricky at times. Students have a lot of confusion around it. So if you are doing the IB curriculum or an A level, we might not need IELTS. So if that partially answers yes to a waiver. So for all CBSE students, it's mandatory. So we accept either the IELTS, TOEFL, or the PTE, but also in the pandemic, we do accept the TOEFL IBT special home-based edition test. And with IELTS, usually we need like a 7 overall and 6.5 in each section. So, but again, it's course specific. Always, make the college website your best friend and just spend as much time with the college website to kind of find more details. So that's on that. There's no waiver that's available. And for all postgraduate applicants, it is mandatory to give an English language test, which is the IELTS, TOEFL, or the PTE. But also, before completing this answer, I again know there will be follow-up questions. So you can go ahead and submit your application without these scores, and you can submit them at a later point, but of course, before coming to the UK. But you don't need it while submitting an application.
All right. So if I were to recap, for postgraduate students, they need to give IELTS or another English language test mandatorily. And for undergraduate students, it depends on whether they've gone from the IB board or not. If an IB board, they don't. Otherwise, they do need to give some of the other English language tests.
So IB or A level, usually we don't need. If the team needs it, they will let you know. But again, like I said, you don't need it while applying. But for CBSE, it is mandatory. So again, like I said, we only accept 3, which is IELTS, TOEFL, or the PT.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Ankit Singh, I hope that answers your question. That is very specific for KCL. I think if you asked a very generic questions about UK, if IELTS is not mandatory in the UK universities and prior education or medium of instruction, yes, it varies from university to university, and many universities do offer waivers as well. But when it comes to King's, as Palak tells us,
Don't
there
ask
are no
waivers.
waivers.
Yeah.
All right.
But
All
I think
right.
IELTS is also related somewhat to your visa requirements also. So that's also a place where you have to look at that.
Yeah. All right, all right. So I think there are a bunch of questions around IELTS. A few students have asked us if I've narrowly missed my IELTS requirements. You're saying 7 with minimum 6.5, and somebody's just got one band 6. Can they still sort of get through the cracks, or it's very very strict?
Very, very strict.
All right.
Like I said, I mean, generally a lot of times we understand where the student's coming from, etc. But Kings is very, very strict with these policies. But I guess, I mean, I convinced myself to it saying that I think that's how you maintain legacies. So probably that's why. So Kings is very strict with all of these entry requirement criteria. You will have to redo IELTS. But where we are a little, what do I say? I mean, a little okay is that a lot of students have this question of is my IELTS score valid, right? So the logic behind IELTS score is that you have to give it. I mean, it should be given prior to 2 years from the session start date. Now I mean, even if the session start date is in September, I mean, usually we start at the last Monday of September, but we consider it as 1st of September. So if your IELTS score is valid before 1st of September in the session year that you're applying for, then that's valid.
Got it. So the student needs to have given IELTS after 1st September 2019 for it to
Yes.
be valid for the upcoming intake.
Yes. Yes.
And if anyone's applying for the September 22 intake, they need to have given IELTS after 1st September 2020.
Yes, that's right.
All right. That clarifies a lot of things. We have another student, Ashita, who's asked a very specific question. She says the program I've applied for requires a high 2:1, 65%. And while I scored 60% from Delhi University, the application update on the portal says the personal statement meets the needs for assessment. So does that mean my application has been processed further?
So you will see the word will be mentioned if it's successful, unsuccessful, or if it's still in process. So if you have a decision on that, just go with that word. There might be different kinds of comments on your application, but successful, unsuccessful, on hold. These are the 3 categories that you basically see. You have to refer to that. With Delhi University, from 65 to 60 is not considered. There are, however, some courses because Delhi University is a highly prestigious university in a category. I mean, there are some cases of 1 or 2% here and there is very specific to some specific course, but it will not be from 65 to 60.
60%.
That's it. Yeah, that will not be.
All right. Understood. So we have another very interesting question from Ishan, right? So of course there are these bare minimum eligibility criteria, but say someone's beyond those. The question Ishan asks is, how does a top university like King's assess students on the basis of just a 600 word SOP on the UCAS?
It's not just a 600 word, honestly.
Okay.
So, like I said, your application is judged holistically, which means scores very mandatory. And if I would have to put it very bluntly and very honestly and very candidly, we have a lot of applications way beyond the number of seats that we have that already meet the minimum eligibility. So for that, it's not a. If I don't want to sound. I mean, very, very honestly, that's not something that's a surprise to us. We have a lot of applications. I mean, most of the applications, I think, that meet that score. So, but like I said, and I also quoted the figures, which is like 66,000 applications for the 280, 300 courses, which is how we have to figure out who fits in better. Also, very interestingly, I would like to point out is that even if you write a perfect personal statement, right? Perfect personal statement, I'll quote unquote, that might not again fetch you an offer because that's not what we're looking at. We don't need anything that's perfect. What we do need is, I think, and I speak on behalf of a lot of universities, is that you have to show that you're a perfect fit. You're not perfect, but you're a perfect fit to the course as well as to the university. So you have to kind of like I said, when you put your course on your personal statement, you have to focus on the course, and in fact, in postgraduate applications, you have to also focus on the university. Now, no admission team, and again, I think I can say this on behalf of all universities, no admissions team finds joy in rejecting any applications. However, what they do see is if you're not a correct fit, there is no point giving you an offer when you come to the university. You just kind of not find it easy to kind of transition and settle down. So that's really important there. So you might not, and most of the courses at King's, I think, except physiotherapy and medicine and dentistry, except those courses, we do not have an interview, which is why your personal statement becomes extremely important, because that's your one shot. Now, if I say those 47 lines or 4,000 characters is really important, because that's how you show you're a correct fit. One tip that I'll share with students, which a lot of students don't accommodate, is one, with UK you have to be really reflective, and it's all academic. All academic, when I say, it's about 85 to 90% academic. Unlike the US, you don't have a prom here, so it's a open sea. Now you can take your boat in any direction. So those are two bits. The third very important bit is always mention how you add value to the university, right? How you contribute. So that's also important to put in your personal statement. And fourth thing, please avoid, specifically if you're writing for Kings, please avoid saying how great Kings is or how great the university is, because we already know how great we are. What we do want to know in those 4,000 characters is how are you a correct fit and how will you add value to our university, and try to be very specific where possible. So, for example, if you're writing a postgraduate person statement, right? So, and if you're interested in chemistry, for example, if that university has a great chemistry labs, or if you've researched to a level where you know you're interested in a particular research with that chemistry faculty of that college does, so you can please quote it, right? So, but avoid doing it in undergraduation, because this is one person statement with five choices and five different universities. So, absolutely avoid mentioning university names there. That's not a good thing, because other universities might not appreciate it. So these are some bits you should be mindful about. And at the same time, your English language test course also forms a component of your holistic application assessment, and so does your letter of recommendation, that also. So it's not just the personal statement, but a lot of things. But personal statement is really important, because, like I say, that's, I think, the only document which is in your control, because your marks, you've done whatever you've done so far, and you don't have much control over it. Letter of recommendation, you don't have much control over it. So I think these are, I mean, your personal statement is a very thought out statement. And I always tell students, the best way to do this is the moment you enter class 12 or the moment you enter your second year of your college degree, maintain a journal, because some basic questions also, what do you like doing? Now, if you suddenly ask me, I mean, I might not come up with things, I'll have to honestly think about what I like doing and what I don't like. What I do know is I don't like maths, because I am phobic to maths. Okay, so that just comes up in my head. But if you tell me what do I like doing, I will probably think for 10 minutes and, okay, what do I like doing now? Because that's pretty evolving. So maintain a journal, write down points and what you like doing, what you don't like doing, what are your career aspirations, what are the things you like doing outside of classroom. All of these things will help you, one, narrow down universities and choices, and also give you some great context for your personal statement, because that's how you focus for probably, what kind of a TEDx talk you want to watch, what kind of a book you want to read, what kind of additional courses you want to do. How do you know with so many choices? Like I always say that this post-millennial generation is spoiled for choices, but it also gives a lot of responsibility on you to make informed decisions. And one very important thing in your personal statement, put it across that this is an informed decision, right? So there are various methods to, how to draft a personal statement. Leverage it will help you with that. And we also do so many sessions. So personal statement is a huge topic. I think I can speak at least for an hour on this. So, I think I've given you a brief here, but that is good or bad, fortunately, unfortunately, yes, that is a very, very important component for your personal statement. But definitely the good part is that document is in your control to draft it. So you can either put it like a think through document, or you can just probably wake up 1 week before the deadline and submit it.
That's some real solid tips and advice, Palak. I think the big one for me is that, considering you're not going to have an interview and everything else is objective, this is the only thing that sets you apart from all the other criteria that are out there from among all the applicants. So yeah, those 600 words or 4,000 characters is all you have. So make it count. And
Take
really
anybody's
solid
help
success.
if you want. I mean, like I always
Yeah.
tell students, if you, I think with post graduation, it's. I mean, people are still in the whole flow. They understand things, but if undergraduate thing, it's something that's overwhelming. And always draft, redraft, discuss with friends, counselors, whoever you want to, and do that. And one important thing that really works, I think, with students is when you write a personal statement, just record it and then listen to it again, because when you read it and when you listen to it, you'll find some things that, oh, this is not sounding right, okay, this I need to change that. So all of these things that do help you.
Another solid tip.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
sharing
gonna
all my
use that.
secrets. Yeah, I'm sharing all my secrets today. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. I think Ishan's asking some very, very interesting questions, and I wanted to bring that in, right? So, question is, how much does community involvement help within the system of the application process?
Okay. So, like I said, anything that you write has to be reflective and make sense to the post that you're applying to. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
you, okay, one small bit about community helping maybe. There are, okay, so personal statement is literally the power of words. Okay, so if I am teaching underprivileged children English after school, right? So I can either mention it that after school hours, I teach, I mean, underprivileged students English. Or I can mention that after school hours, I teach 30, a batch of 30 underprivileged children who all of them have scored more than 70% in their examination. And that's how I've added value to them. So it's the same I mean, it's the same text, but how you've used it to your advantage and how you've created an impact, that's what's value. So you have to, like I said, your control, your personal statement. And again, a lot of students forget that the personal statement is personal to you. I think in all of the other do's and don'ts, they forget that it has to be unique and personal. So focus on that. Community service, put it in a way that shows and adds value. So that's there. Absolutely avoid shopping list bullet points, not something you want to see. So if you've done 10 things, but out of that, 5 are not matching to the course that you're applying to, right? So if you want to do marketing and if you've done something that's only relevant to probably another subject like economics, if you can't link it to marketing, don't put it. We don't want to see again how great you are with what extra things you've done. A lot of students ask me that my friend has done 10 things, but I have only done 3. Will they have more value in application? Now, all depends on how you highlight those 3 things. So for us, it's always quality over quantity.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Fair enough. So let's move on to the next set of topics, right? So I think what we hear is around questions around saying what is the cost of attendance at King's College London, and subsequently any kind of scholarships that are offered by King's, and how do you get those scholarships?
Okay, so we don't really have a concept of cost of attendance. What we do have is a tuition fee plus living expenditure, right? So tuition fee could be between £20,000 to £50,000 annually. So of course the medicine courses are towards the expensive side. So that's the range. And for living expenditure, it will, one, it's of course dependent on the lifestyle you choose to live. But usually it's 15 lakhs a year. So that's how it is. Now you can of course total it, and there aren't such any additional hidden cost. I would say not something drastic that I'm aware of. So this is basically the cost there. But with scholarships, Kings is not very generous with scholarships. That's an outright truth. But with UG, we have something for UG and PG. In fact, for PG, we also had this for business last year, which is quite unusual. So it's all updated on the university website. So there'll be different sections for UG scholarships and PG scholarships. Please refer to that. They start updating it, I think, somewhere in October, and it's still getting updated. So it's that for the academic year. But please check out other external organizations that provide scholarships. So the British Council website usually has a list of comprehensive list of scholarships that are offered. Do a Google search. Like this year, I think HSBC had some scholarships. So those things will be there, but you'll have to kind of be out there and research all of those things. And I know a follow-up question will be how do you apply and what kind of scholarships. So all the details of scholarship are mentioned on the scholarship section. That if so, some scholarships will need an application. Some will automatically be available if you meet those entry requirements. I mean those eligibility requirements criteria. It's based usually it's merit based, sometimes need based, etc. But we don't have any individual scholarships in the sense if you mail us with details that I'm a school topper or I mean God forbid if you have some financial issues, etc. On those individual basis, we don't have. Whatever is there will be published on the website, and you'll have to check that out if you fit that. But most importantly, you'll have to be an applicant or a current student to avail of scholarships. So that's it.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. And I think the next natural question that students talk about is ROI, right? So what are the kind of career options that students have after studying at King's College London? Also, what kind of assistance does the university provide for international students with respect to getting good jobs?
Generally, ROI is a very good question, and you should ask this question. And ROI, I would say, is not just in terms of money, but also in terms of time and effort that you've invested in your university education. So that's a very, very valid question. Now, it's also subjective. Some students, I mean, it's subjective on what do you consider as an optimal ROI. So that also is based on different categories. But also, to everybody who's watching, I will clear this misconception that everybody has. There is no concept of placement guarantee in the Western world. That's not how usually universities function. It's all placement assistance. And also placement usually is called internships. So I mean, and I know Indian students refer to placements as jobs. So usually we call placements as internships. So I'm assuming that you asked about jobs. So like I said, we don't really have a guaranteed system, and I don't know of universities as such who do. And irrespective of things, if you do it from any good university who's recognized, who's prestigious, you will not really have a problem finding a job. But of course, it might not be that you immediately land up. I think with our stats, about 94% of our students end up in their desired jobs within 6 months. And now specifically, it's all more flurry because of the post-study work visa, which is why I think UK is now blooming. So you might, if you're looking for a job perspective, I think look at a more broader range, which is how good the visa rules are, how do you compare between different countries and continents, rather than a university specific thing. So there are two aspects to it. One, of course, the kind of university you're graduating from definitely adds that value in your CV, but also it's how much active and proactive and enthusiastic you are as a student. So I always tell students who are going from India, please unlearn things that you've learned here right now. If you are going with this mindset of being spoon-fed and being this pampered kid at home, you're just wasting your money. Don't do that. And it'll honestly, I don't know how to put it, but it will seem very odd to you when you are in the middle of students from 185 different countries and your thinking is just to kind of in silos. That's not how things work there. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question about what kind of support do we have, so we have a very, very strong career service division team. They help you with internships, with jobs, etc. They organize 1,000+ career events in a year. So they range from employer master classes to virtual networking nights to guest lectures, CV classes, mock interviews. You can just basically book an appointment with them. They're also happy to review your CV. If anything you want to discuss about what kind of career you should look at, all of those things are there. So also because King's is very, very centrally located, we do have the privilege of getting a lot of high profile visitors in our campus. So that also opens up a lot of opportunities to network. And I speak to so many students who've actually landed into their jobs because they joined student societies, and that gave them an option to network, and they've landed in some great, even government sectors in UK and whatnot. So networking is a big thing in UK. I mean, you have to be out there, use it. You have to network, and I think it's valid with all spheres of life. Even for us, I think networking is a big thing. So if you're part of any student specific societies, or if there is any guest lecture that are there, or if you're just in the middle of your class batch, etc., just network. That will land up with some great opportunities. And also the team helps you with finding the job. There's also the portal that where everything is shared, resources are shared, job opportunities are shared, and you're also a part of that same King's Connect portal even after 2 years of graduation. So that support will always kind of be there with you. Because
Got
I'm
it.
giving
Got
two long answers for your
No,
question.
no, this is very,
Which
very
is
helpful. I think
you're
this is
just
gold.
nodding your head, and I was like, okay, maybe I should put a comma and then or a full
No,
stop. I don't know.
this is gold. This is quite helpful. I think 91% placement record, and I couldn't agree more with the fact around students having to let go of all the practices that
Yeah,
they've learned here and literally going out there and networking and finding their way through really
yeah.
jobs that they would love to do, right?
Very
Not just
genuinely,
get the first job that comes their way. Yeah.
absolutely. That's and very genuinely. When students have this favorite question to ask me that, uh, how do we live as an international student? What do we kind of do? My first basic advice is please learn to cook. So, and I know Indian students don't do it. This will save you a lot of money. Budgeting is as fancy it is to live in London. It's expensive. It is
Yeah.
a fact.
Yeah.
It's an expensive place. And if you're right in the heart of central London, it is definitely expensive. I mean, sure, I will. It's good for us because we get to travel central London. That's all sponsored. But for you, you'll have to pay for it. So it has to be part of your budgeting. So
Absolutely.
and stick to budgeting. And it's really important. So basic things like cooking, budgeting, which honestly Indian students are so pampered at home that they don't know what budgeting is. I mean, they've
Hmm.
never kind of and I don't know how to say this more subtly, but all the fancy schools that we come from, etc., we are all pampered kids. We have this huge pocket monies, etc. This is and the point is, and I always tell students also that if you are in London, even if you don't have monetary constraints, I think the best exposure is to work part time because
Yeah.
that gives you a new reality and there is a lot of dignity of labor. It's not that it's a yeah.
And on the part-time part, right? I think many of our students would want to know that as well, right? What are the regulations around that, and how much can they earn?
So the regulations around that is your visa allows you to work 20 hours per week during term time and full
Yeah.
time otherwise, which I think full time is around 40 hours if I'm not wrong. And again, Kings helps you finding those opportunities. Also, there are a lot of opportunities at Kings to work, and there are. I mean, I think except the examination department for obvious reasons, you can work. I think in pretty much all departments. So we
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
student ambassadors, etc. But they also help you find jobs. I mean, beyond Kings environment. So I think. And King's pay is also fairly decent. So for student ambassadors, I guess we pay something around 10.85 pounds an hour. So which
That's
is
fantastic.
yeah, which
That
is decent. So yeah, you can
it's
always work
almost
it.
210 pounds a
Yeah,
week.
yeah, and it's a great exposure. More than
Yeah.
money, it's a great exposure to manage and budget and cook, and it's just a great feeling because if you're going there, you might as well take the advantage fully. And I always tell students because Kings has not one but five campuses, so they're spread across central London. They're all short bus rides or within walking distance. So consider I mean, pretty much the whole of London is your classroom, and that's how you should go. You should, if you think that this is a classroom I will be confined to, although the academicians are great, I mean, your peers will be great, but there's so much more beyond that you can choose. So, I mean, a lot of our students in their breaks will probably go to a court to hear the hearing, or will go to a museum or a library. So, and a lot of times, the concepts that are being taught inside books are one written by this that book is written by the same faculty who's teaching you, and
All right.
I mean, yeah, it's just a great experience, but only if you take advantage of that.
Got it. So we've spoken a lot about admissions, about getting in, about studying. I think our viewers would want to know a lot more about the culture. Like, what is the student culture like at the university? What kind of activities, societies, clubs are there? Also, if they want to live on campus, accommodation, they want to know all of that.
And there are too many questions now, so we'll break it. So
Yeah.
I think with culture, it's very, very, very vibrant. There is a very strong, and I think one of the oldest student unions that we have. So
Yeah.
it's really, really active. They have about 300 plus student societies, and they are very, very varied. So they organize so many events. They are it's a very vibrant and buzzing campus. So we have student societies ranging from research to baking, to a Harry Potter society, to a Bollywood society, to an Indian society, King's Opera Society, and just so much more. And also there are specific sports clubs. So we have about 70 sports clubs. So baseball, football, anything you name it, in chess and whatever. So everything is there. There are some specific sports clubs which are different for girls and boys. There's a fitness club, so it's pretty much there. But again, like I said, if you just choose to remain in silos, it will not help. You have to be out there, and these student societies are a great way to ice break and know students. And you I mean, there might be a cohort which is in your classroom, but there's so much more outside, right? So you have to engage, interact, and all of those things. So that's really important. Again, like working part-time is an experience, of being a part of student societies is also a great experience. So that was that. I think the second question was on accommodation. So because we are right in the city, we do not have accommodation on campus, but they're all walking distance. So Kings has about 10 residences that they own and manage. So of course they vary with 150 pounds to 410 pounds a week. You choose what kind of a budget do you have and what is your preferences. I think for a specific PG accommodation, they've come up with the new accommodations called Grad Plus, and I've heard it's next to a five-star hotel. So I've not seen it yet. So that's there. But accommodation is guaranteed if you want, but there is a certain deadline. I think this year is June, mid, or it's July, I don't know. But to submit your application before the deadline, there are 4 steps to do it. I'll quickly run you through the steps. But there are also various other options. So there are intercollegiate halls that are available. So intercollegiate halls is basically where all University of London students stay together. Again, a great opportunity to know people from LSE or other University of London colleges. And because it's right in central London, there is no dearth of private options that are also available. So you can do that also. Choose whatever you wish to. But for accommodation, there are 4 easy steps. One, you have to register your interest in accommodation. I think that's somewhere in March that you send your interest. And also at the same point, you put down your date of birth or any specific medical conditions that you have. You can just all specify there. The second step is that you receive an invite within 2 weeks. So once you put in an interest, the invite will be shared, and then that invite will have a specific time and a date slot where you have to go, and the portal will be accessible to you, and you book your room. Of course, the third step is booking your room, so you can select the kind of room you want. There are different criteria, budget, you can set that criteria also. And then of course the fourth step is to sign a contract, which is it's a legally binding contract which confirms your room. And if you are 18 before you're coming, and also if you have a serious medical condition, then the team will talk to you one to one, and they will handhold you a little more. And again, the follow-up question I think will be if you can change it once you book it. So you can change it once. So only once can you make that change and do it. But all rooms before the deadline, if you put, they will give you a room. Also to keep it fair, because the offers are released at different times. So the team does not release all rooms at once. So because we don't want students to, like, I mean, the set who's receive their offer first to kind of exhaust that. So they are, if so, by chance, if you're trying to book a room and if you don't like anything, then you can probably wait and redo it, because there might be some fresh additions to it.
All right. Thanks, Palak. This has been super helpful. I think over to the last sort of set of topics that we have for the evening around COVID-19. So how are things now at King's College London? I think the most asked question of students for us is whether classes would be done online or face to face, and how are things looking in terms of also the quarantine that students might need to do when they fly in.
I hope I had a definite answer to this one as I had to my other questions. But it's as of so the situation looks pretty good in London right now, but we all know it's pretty evolving. So as of now, what we are planning for is that we will have a blended learning, which is all the larger group teachings because some larger group teachings have 300, 400 students also. So they will all be online, but the smaller group teachings and research, etc., all of that will be on campus. So, but there are about 5 courses, which is in psychiatry, psychology, dentistry, etc., where you have to be on campus. So, except those 5 courses, you are, as of now, you are. I mean, we don't have anything more latest that's released, but this is the approach that we're looking at, that you come to the campus and the larger group will still be online, but you can, engage and do other things with smaller group meetings on campus. So that's the plan as of now, but we're waiting for, because it's too far. I mean, September right now is too far. So, but this is, we are very hopeful because UK is opening up in phases and things look good, and schools are also open and restaurants are open. So that's how it looks, but with accommodation, the quarantine cost. I mean, so we've raised it to the management, but we haven't heard anything as of now. So we don't know if something will come. I mean, will we reimburse? Will we not reimburse? We've not heard anything yet, but we've informed the management about it. So whatever decision they come up with. So for all the King students, there is this offer holders hub, and there is also this international offer holders hub. So anything that comes up as a decision will be posted there. So you might know it before we do. So just check the offer holders hub and all the relevant information will be put out there.
All right. Thanks so much, Palak. I think that was a very, very helpful session for our viewers. I just checked if you've covered all questions on the chat. Seems like we have. So thanks, viewers, for joining in, and thank you so much, Palak, for this session today. It was very helpful. For all the viewers out there, thanks for joining Leverage TV session. We have a Leverage TV live session going live every day at 6 p.m. So stay tuned and join us back again at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And meanwhile, if you want to see this recording of this particular session, you can view it on leverageedu.com and go to Leverage TV, and you can find all the recorded sessions. You can also see these sessions on our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram communities, as well as join us on our Telegram community called Leverage Beyond, and get access to all the latest that's happening around Leverage TV, and also get access to loads of blogs that might be relevant for you in your study abroad journey. Thanks for joining in, folks.
Thanks, Ikiji, for hosting. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. I hope this was useful. Thank you.
Thank you.